Another Bright Spot podcast.
Another bright
Another
spot.
Bright Spot.
Another 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 Bright Spot podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Another Bright Spark podcast. Our Bright Spark today is Henrique Olifiers. And we are at Albert House, centre of London, Old Street.
That's it.
That's it, a home of Bossa Games, where Henrique is co-founder and gamer-in-chief, which is a really cool job title, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, we've talked before about, you've worked with Ignis, and we'll touch upon Spectrum next and that kind of thing in a little bit. You're a huge gamer yourself, as well as being in the industry. Where does that passion come from?
Childhood, really. I think around 78, 79, I got given my first console. It was a Pong. It was made by Philco Ford, like Ford who makes cars, right?
Yeah.
And they made a video game console. After that was Atari 2600, and well, all my peers were playing football, because that's what Brazilians do.
Yeah.
I was locked in a room playing video games on my square joystick. Next thing you know, I learned about computers, and I got a ZX Spectrum clone, thus the link with the ZX Spectrum Next. That was my first computer, the first one I owned. Very few people know the ZX Spectrum was famous in Eastern Europe and in Latin America, Brazil in particular, but it wasn't made by Sinclair. It was just
Did
clones.
they have the spec, or was it just companies had taken the console and done their own version of it, or?
Yeah, it was pretty much copyright infringement right down to it, right? They just cloned it and made versions of it
Sure.
were somewhat compatible. Some of them were very compatible, but they were not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
But doesn't matter. I got the bug of it, and I got connected to British magazines back then, and that's probably why I ended up in Britain many years later.
Come back, that's where the games come from, what you loved.
Yeah.
Were the games as readily available then? So the Sinclair games were released obviously in the UK. If they were they distributed to Brazil and Eastern Europe?
No. It was of course a lot of piracy and so on, right? But there weren't that many games, and exactly because there weren't that many games, I ran out of things to play and got into making my own games.
Wow, okay.
And because there was this whole setup of schoolyard trading games, I give you one if you give me one kind of thing, I had to make games that nobody else had.
Yeah.
So I would have trading stock to get the games that I wanted to play. And that's how my first game came about, James Lemonade Stand.
James Lemonade Stand.
Yeah.
What was the game? What did you have to do with James
It was a
Lemonade
tycoon
Stand?
kind of game where you have to buy lemonade and
Yeah.
sugar and ice cubes, and depending on the weather, you're going to sell more or less of them, and you end up with overstock or will not had enough. To be frank, is a trope game. It's an established genre, right? I didn't come up with it.
But still, to develop, it's necessity, I suppose. You just said it, didn't you? You didn't have many games, so you had to learn to make games to do the thing that you love. It's very like an engineering-based way around, isn't it? If you're like driving cars, there wasn't many cars available, you would have to learn to sort of build and make your own.
Yeah, exactly. And the curiosity about how are these things made, right? How can I make them better? Oh my God, how is this possible? And kind of tweaking and learning, and you didn't have the internet, you didn't have a lot of information available. Best case scenario, you could find a book somewhere, right, that you could extract
Get some
information
code
from.
and build. Yeah, I had the same thing with the Amstrad. It came with a code book, and you could make a basic version of like Pong and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. But what I really never liked about it was amazing times where you get the full schematics of the hardware you're buying, right? Every computer came in with all the parts on a layout, and you could trace things up, and if something went wrong. But they never had a lot of machine code, which is what you needed to make proper games, right? They will teach you basic, they will teach you the hardware, machine code will be an appendix. Oh yeah, there is a thing.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more, buy this book. I say, where will I find this book? How can I get my hands? Yeah, like in Rio de Janeiro. Good luck with that.
Yeah. Do you remember that moment? So for me, I'm in a band. I've played guitar for years. The moment I got into that's my main sort of passion. I've mentioned it on this podcast before. I do apologise, viewers. I was at my uncle's 40th, and I was obsessed with Oasis. It was 1995. I just wanted to be Noel Gallagher. I didn't know anything about music. I just loved the record. And one of my cousin's friends came round with a guitar and started playing Oasis songs. And I was like, well, you can play Oasis songs on a guitar. I'd seen them, but it never occurred to me. And that's when I fell in love with the instruments, because I wanted to follow that passion, follow the dream. It sounds like you were the coding. Was there a distinct moment that you remember?
Yeah, there was actually a very marked one. It was with a British game called Elite by David Brabham and Ian Bell. It was the first game I ever touched or experienced, which was open-ended, a sandbox, if you wish. Up to that point, it was essentially text-based adventures, which kind of exploration and trying new words and things like that, right? Open door, walks out, or arcade games. Those were the two genres that I was used to. And then all of a sudden I got hit in the face with something which is, here's a spaceship, here's a universe, you go out and explore. Yeah. You can be a pirate, you can be a trader, you can be law enforcement, whatever you want. Yeah. And not only that, the scope of the thing was magical. It's so big because it was procedurally generated. Again, black magic by those two guys. How could they fit that in such a small space, right? And create something that felt like it was a universe alive and inhabited and dynamic. That what propelled me, okay, I need to stop with this basic thing and go into machine code to understand what the hell is going on here, right?
Absolutely.
And the rest is history, I guess.
I think when you think about it, it's like, I mean, you and I are the earliest generation of who can sit in our bedrooms and explore whole worlds. We were the first ones to do it. Absolutely fascinating. I was reading a statistic that 24% of people have some sort of retro console. For people in the 30s and 40s, it's a SNES or an N64. People in the 50s and 60s, it's the old Sinclair and the old Commodores. There's been a rise of people getting back into more simpler gaming. Why do you think that is?
That's a very good question. There is, of course, rosy-tinted glasses, right? You remember a version of yourself which was freer of responsibilities and everything was possible. There were no joint pains anywhere. The world was surely better than it is today,
the food
right?
tasted better, the summers were longer and hotter.
Everything was better, music was better. But there is something to the human condition, but if you look at technology particularly, there is this harking back to simpler times. And you see that from music, for instance, right? We now have streaming, we had CDs, etc. Biggest seller today is vinyl. Right? I won't go into the details of vinyl being better or not. That is irrelevant. The fact that we want that physical object and we still go through the process of putting it in, needle on the thing and scratchy sound, but we still get to enjoy that. There is something fundamentally tactile and valuable about you understanding everything that's going on there. For me to understand everything that's going on, say, on a streaming platform like Spotify, God help you. Right? Yeah. Am I being played by algorithms? Is this the best music that I could be played? There's all the music in the world. What should I listen to next? It's too much choice. It's too much noise. It's like I'm not enjoying it anymore. I think that is this ability to fully understand what it is.
It's ownership, isn't it? It's a physical ownership of
and feel like you are in control.
Yeah. Do you think this is why, as well, sort of subscription-based, like Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation aren't as popular? People want the physicalness of a game.
The people who had contact with the physical, they certainly do. The Spectrum X, for instance, when people make games for it, the physical copies oversell the digital ones. And you can see that repeated in the likes of Atari, Recreations, and things like that. There are whole businesses that do premium boxes of modern games. That tactile thing or opening, there is a map. Right, I remember when I played Ultima Online that there was a cloth map inside. Right?
Same with the Zelda. When the SNES you open, you get Hyrule on my wall posted up, and I planned where I'd go next.
Yeah, and you treasure those things, right? That there is love and effort gone into the design of making those things, and if you know how difficult these things are to make, you appreciate them. Yeah. Digital is very disposable, right? Oh yeah, here's the right. Oh, if the company goes down, that right is gone as well. We might change the end user license agreement and take it away from you. So there is something there that tells in the back of your brain that this is not really yours, kind of thing. That might be it. But I think that it still is the fact that you understand that I have something is mine. I appreciate every aspect that gone into it. I can see it, I can touch it, and I can use it in any shape or form I want. Yeah. I think that is probably where it is.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of pre-order games are popular as well. I've just pre-ordered Assassin's Creed Shadows. And I went for the collector's edition with the statue in the box and that kind of thing because I know previously when I played, I think it was Origins, the one that was set in Egypt, I was obsessed by it. It was such a good story. I was so engaged with it. I wanted some ownership of it, and it's because the stories stay with you, and that's the really powerful thing.
And you are also defined as an individual by what you surround yourself with, right? You'll be identified by what kind of music do you like, right? What kind of
guitars and
guitars,
CDs,
or food, and
yeah,
everything
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? It's very hard for you to identify yourself with something that is intangible.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Online, yes, they can see you playing, they can see your achievements and all that, but I cannot put that on
No,
a shelf.
you can't have your T-shirt. You don't walk
Right?
around with the logo. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
are
absolutely.
you a Trekkie or a Star Wars guy? That means a lot to a lot of people.
Absolutely,
So-
yeah. Star Wars. Yeah, but no, absolutely. Mark and I were talking in the car before, and you've just touched upon it, sort of the connection, the sort of human element. In gaming, at the minute I'm talking about AI basically. So if you look at AI, you can write a book, you can write a script, you can do a piece of code, you can write an entire novel now. I don't know where we're at the stage at with coding in terms, but I was thinking, is it possible to actually create an actual map, buildings? Can you program that into AI? And if not yet, do you think it will happen? And would it be possible to create entire games based on an artificial intelligence model?
There is one thing about AI which is undeniable. You can't get around this fact. It will only get better. Okay? People who look at AI today and pick on its flaws and say, yeah, but it cannot do this or it cannot do that. Well,
It's learning.
just wait and see, right? It's not going to go backwards from where it is today. So a lot of the stuff it produces is subpar. It will not be for very long. I'm already surprised at where it stands, right? If you're not surprised by what AI can do right now, you are missing something. It is impressive. Not perfect by any stretch of imagination, but it is impressive. 5 years ago, nobody would come up to you and say, that will happen,
No.
right? It sounded like science fiction. It is here. Now, right now you can't. You cannot create a game with AI, right? There are aspects of games development that are being improved by the existence of AI. For instance, if I have a game idea, I am a game designer, and I try to convey that idea to my team. In the past, we will use a concept artist to kind of sketch things very quickly, and it will not be quite what you needed. It will take a few hours for them to do that, right? If I want to visually impact something, now I can use AI to illustrate what I'm talking about. I can do pitches very quickly, right?
You don't have to hand sketch it. You can create
Exactly.
imagery and
Yeah. So none of that will go into production, but accelerates the communication process of a concept, of an idea within a team, for a developer to a publisher, etc. Right? If you're pitching games, you're not using AI art to show what you intend to do with the game. You are probably spending more money than you should. Now,
that's it.
game balancing, the first pass on items generation and things like that, right? For you to put things in the game very quickly, early prototyping stage. It can do that. It can help you with that, right? There are pipelines that can turn 2D images into 3D models. As long as you're not your main character in the game, it can do that. Placeholder music. You want a kind of music in the game right now. You can pick and choose commercial music, sure, but you can also ask AI to conduct some stuff and compose some stuff.
of course,
and down the line, you remove all of that and put
Whatever
proper
music
composition
everyone-
that you
sure.
commission. So there are these aspects. But just ask the AI to make a game, it can't make anything yet, right? And coding is the one, you can use AI, and a lot of people do, for coding for websites and JavaScript and things like that. The problem is that gaming is at the very cutting edge of coding. The problem that game developers solve day in and day out
Is new things.
is absolutely like top of the shelf
Yeah.
kind of problems that involve a lot of considerations and performance, especially considerations. So AI is not yet at the stage that it can help senior developers to do that. It can help junior developers, but I don't know if that's actually a help.
No. Well, with a junior developer, you want them to use their imagination.
I want them
surely.
to make it wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
They can make it right. They
Yeah,
can learn
exactly,
then.
to learn,
Yeah.
right? So that when they are kind of assisted in that way, there are now studies and considerations that they're actually not graduating or learning as fast as they would otherwise.
They're getting too handheld through. They're not making different mistakes.
Yeah, they don't understand the solution because the solution was given to them.
Of course.
So yes, we need to adjust our expectations how we deal with this piece of technology. In my head, it's a piece of technology like any other.
A tool.
A tool, if you wish, right? When you remove a red eye from a photo that you took on Photoshop, is that AI? I would say probably is, right? It's a very advanced algorithm that would train into eye removal, and you don't think twice about doing that.
No.
Right?
Get rid of whole backgrounds and people and
People, we take that for granted. That's a machine learning AI on the background.
Again, the coding element and the images and the graphics, if we did get to a point where it could create a game, I'm not sure if it would create the complexity. If you take something like The Last of Us, which is an incredible story, I don't think it'd be possible. That's a human element, isn't it? You've got to know the human condition. I remember we played Last of Us Part 2, my wife and I. We got to the end of it and we were heartbroken. You know, it touched us in a way like a movie would. I know games are a lot more in depth now, but it was just incredible. I don't think a machine of that is going to understand the depth of human emotion.
Right now, there is, human emotion and content that you want to watch is a moving target by default. Right? The games that I used to enjoy 20, 30 years ago, I still have fond memories of them. Majority of them, if I launch today and try to play, it will be a disappointment.
Yeah, of course.
Right? My memories are much better than the actual thing.
Rose-tinted memories. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Right? It's the same with films and books, etc. You go back too far, and you ask yourself, why did I ever enjoy this thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we as creatures, we are always evolving. Music, film, literature, all of that. There are the classics that remain with us, but even the classics are usually reinterpreted to remain current and have appeal. Yeah. Right?
Like Shakespeare, the play is
Shakespeare.
reinvented. Yeah, of
all
course.
the time.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah,
right?
exactly the same with this.
Exactly the same with this. So The Last of Us is a great game right now, and at some point, maybe AI will be able to do that, but by the time they do that, you don't want to play The Last of Us anymore. Now the question is, will AI be able to anticipate what is that you want? We are not there yet. Right now, AI is remixing what we already built ourselves, right? And it can make some extrapolations and sometimes can come with something which is funny and creative and whatnot. But bottom line is, it cannot touch your heart just now.
So there's a great story I'd love you to tell about the time you were trying to get the rights for Spectrum Next, the actual name, because you wanted it to be just like a Christmas present with the original logos. You wanted the original case in that same excitement. So
exactly.
It had to be the same memory, didn't it?
It had to.
Yeah.
The whole thing came about a friend of mine who lives in Brazil, which is a hardware like genie, right? Yeah. A lot of the stuff you find today on the web, like Atari 2600 adapters for cartridges and things like that, or FPGA machines, etc. It came from him, right? He's the guy who come up with the first idea. Then people remix and it becomes big. But he's this kind of. The guy. He has a pick and mix and a whole assembly line on his shed, right? Yeah. That's the kind of guy we are talking about. Genius. Yeah. He came up with what the Spectrum could be in the future, but as a board. He was basically picking up every expansion that the Spectrum had, like SD cards and RGB video output, etc., put on a single board that you could take the old one and replace with that. Yeah.
But you need the old technology, wouldn't you? So old televisions, the CTRs and stuff.
Exactly. And now you have HDMI and whatnot. Yeah. So that board kind of fixed all of this. Yeah. Instead of you trying to attach a lot of expansions to the poor small Spectrum, you just replaced the board with something that came with all the facilities. And he wanted that to come to the UK, which is the birthplace and where half of the Spectrum users in the world live.
Absolutely.
But what I told him at the time was that this is not the experience we had. When we bought the Spectrum, or in our case, the TK90X.
The copy.
Right? It was nonetheless a full box. And we opened that box, there was a manual and there was a smell. And that box
did it have the same rubber keys as well?
Exactly. Yeah, it was exactly the rubber keys.
Yeah.
So you had the rubber keys and then plugged into a TV and off you go, right? You didn't have to tinker and build things. That came later. So I told him, let's try to make that. Let's try to recreate that. In order to do that, I needed the brands, which now have been sold to Amstrad, which in turn have been bought by Sky because Amstrad made the set-top boxes, the satellite set-top boxes.
So Amstrad bought Sinclair because of the computer side, so they wanted the rights to that. And then Amstrad also had satellite dishes, Alan Sugar, obviously Sky, cheaper to have our own satellite dishes. Let's just buy Amstrad straight out.
Exactly.
So you had to follow all the way to Sky. That was right. Yeah.
I had a friend in Sky, high up.
Handy.
Yeah, very handy, always handy. And she helped me navigate that, and I secured the brands. The next step was to secure the team, like the original designers of the machine, right? Like the guys in Cambridge. Phil Candy and Rick Dickinson, who originally designed the machine. I brought them in, and they recreated what the Spectrum would look like, what they would feel like if it was
A modern day.
a modern day.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had this machine that was in hardware terms evolved. It had more colors, more sound. It was completely retrocompatible. We could even attach a cassette tape to it and load your original tapes.
Which is important. You were saying before about with the Spectrum games, they want a physical copy. So you put the
Yes.
cassette in,
Yeah.
make your own cassette, the tape, you have it on your shelf.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or you could use SD cards like they do. They sell SD cards with a nice box. You open up, you insert the SD card, and you play. All the comforts of modern facilities, HDMI and whatnot, is there, right? But at its heart, it is a Sinclair machine designed by the same people.
With this right brand. Yeah.
Exactly.
The right feeling at Christmas, you open it up. And didn't you dispatch the last ones just in time for Christmas? Was it the last batch that went out?
Exactly. Most of the world, right? There's 80 countries, so some of them not quite. Because there was also that problem of we got caught out by that pandemic.
Yes, of
that
course.
wiped out electronics from the face of the earth. And we had to
Yeah.
redesign the board because the parts that we used were not available anymore. And Ignis came in and helped us through a very rough patch.
That's right. It was the, I'm trying not to do a plug on this podcast, but it was the FPGA was
Yes.
either no longer available or did they hike the price? What was the...
Both.
Both. Okay, so
Yeah,
tell us about the price. I think it's really interesting. I was trying to convey the story to Mark on the car on the way down. But yeah, what was the original spec, the original price? And
We
what they said?
originally we used a Xilinx Spartan FPGA, and as we were ready to go into manufacture, we got a notice from Xilinx saying that they will not produce it for the foreseeable future. And if you wanted to use FPGA, here are the other ones you could pick and choose from. Completely different die, IDE, everything is new, right? So we say, okay, there are probably some of the market, right? And we started to look in the market, and just after that announcement, they went from, I don't know, $9, $10 each to $200, $300 each.
From $9, $10 to 200.
Yeah, on the black market, right?
I mean, that's just not.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the price of the
you've got
whole
the
machine.
you've got the crowdfunding already.
Yeah, the money
You've
is
got the
in.
price. Yeah,
Yeah, I can't change the price.
You can't go back and say, just to let you know, it's going to be an extra £200 per console.
Yeah, there were a couple of sleepless nights there. So we had to redesign the entire firmware around a new version of a FPGA.
Yeah.
And we ended up working with your team, the Ignis team, to make that happen.
Yeah.
And in the end, we shipped, but it was fairly late, far more expensive than I expected.
And with the different chip, was the more you could do with it, more.
Yeah, because the new chip had a lot more space on it. So we decided, okay, now what do we do? So every time there was a new idea from the engineering team, oh, we can add this new circuit to it that does this new other thing, right? And
I bet our engineers love that.
Yeah, they did love that. Every week there was a new change to it, and poor Nico would say, what the?
I think he started going grey round about that time, Nico.
Yes,
so,
I did not have a single one. But look, it was a work of passion, so you have to indulge. None of these guys, they have been paid for it. Like, we didn't take a salary out of this project. It was a project made
Passion.
Love.
Yeah.
And because of that, we got to get some leeway. If someone has an idea, they have to be able to see it through. Sometimes that idea has to be shut down, but that's very rare. Yeah. We tried to put in as much as we could to make use of the bigger FPGA that we ended up with.
Yeah, fantastic. So you crowdfunded the project. I know there was 2 iterations, and the second one sort of blew you away. I'm quite interested to know, how did you go about the crowdfunding? Because we work with a lot of clients who do a similar thing or have a great idea, don't know how to go about funding and stuff. What was your process to do that Kickstarter?
It's a very long one. By the time a Kickstarter goes live like that, we have been working for at least a year, if not 2. And when I mean working, includes prototyping the thing, knowing that the thing can be done, but also creating a community. You want to have everybody lined up before you hit the crowdfunding. So you have a measure of success, and then it can snowball. You cannot go into crowdfunding with no one thinking that the crowdfunding campaign itself will generate enough momentum for it to be satisfied.
You have to do surrounding activity to post it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that, of course, includes PR, going to conferences and talking to people about the project, telling people what is it that we want to do, and listening to them about what is it that we should do instead.
And what they would like.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And that started to build confidence on what you are about to do. And the second you flip the switch, they are there. Case in point, the second Kickstarter got funded in less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
And
what was the original target?
250,000.
Yeah.
And we ended up with 1.8 million.
Quite a big jump.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spectrum Next is a great story. You've been with Bossa for, I said, 14 and a half years now.
Yeah.
Looking down your CV, previously you worked with EA, which is obviously a much bigger organisation.
Yeah.
What was it like for you at EA, and what was the difference between like an independent studio where you are now and a big behemoth like EA?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, one of the reasons I shifted out of EA after shipping a FIFA game was because it felt to me that is big and it's slow moving. And in the world that we were back then, things were changing very fast, right? We were going from physical to digital. There is a lot of momentum in the indie space, and ideas, new gameplay ideas, were not coming from the big players. They were coming from these guys in bedrooms and small studios, pushing games that you put your hand up and say, how the hell did you come up with that? And that is so funny, how no one thought of that before. And that was the exciting bit, right? It's great to make a FIFA game and work on that, but it's very constant. It's very similar in every iteration, right? And in our studio, no two games
graphics are
better.
music,
And
more
you have
players,
to do that, right? Because football is football.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
The players don't suddenly get superpowers where they
Yeah,
can...
exactly. You don't want them running around with machine guns or jumping 5 meters high.
That's a great idea for a game.
Yeah, maybe.
Machine gun football.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a tried and tested formula.
Yeah.
People buy it because they love it. Like Assassin's Creed, like all those huge franchises, you want to be doing the same thing. You can tweak it and develop it.
And expand. But you want familiarity there.
You don't pick up GTA expecting to kick a ball around a pitch. You want to steal a car, kill a prostitute, rob a bank. All
There you
that
go.
good stuff. Yeah.
That's the experience.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to make something different in a different way, you end up in a studio like Bossa, right?
Yeah.
I could not imagine any studio that would greenlit I Am Bread, where you are a slice of bread who wants to become toast. Right?
And there's not always a toaster available, so sometimes
That's
you have to
the
use
whole point.
Yeah, yeah.
No, the first level there's a toaster, then no more.
And then off, I won't ruin the game for anyone to play it.
No, it's fun.
Yeah,
It's
really
I think
fun game,
it's extreme. You have to break into a car, turn it on, then go on the bonnet that's warming
and
up.
toast yourself.
and
There's the hairdryer, I think, as well.
So break a TV, and when it's on flames, you toast yourself using a bowling ball or whatever. So that kind of thing, right? And it went on to be a very successful game, shipped millions of copies across multiple platforms, and we are happy that we created that game, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't do that at a large company like EA. Everything is expensive, everything is very big, so you have to limit the risk that you take.
You can't go on a limb as much as you can here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of quirkiness in your games. I mean, like the Surgeon Simulator. Is there a creative team here that sort of come up with snowball ideas? How do you come up with them?
We come up with these ideas in game jams. We stop for a couple of days, give a theme to the entire team. That team will break up into smaller teams, usually 5 or 6, right? And they will work for 48 hours on a new game concept that is aligned with that theme. Okay? On the case of Surgeon Simulator, the theme was Heartbeat. It was part of the Global Game Jam 2013. And a lot of people make rhythm games and etc. And my team decided, all right, let's make a game about heart transplant.
Yeah.
And they ended up with the weirdest and most difficult game in living memory.
I've not played it, but I've seen the trailer. It looks absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're doing heart transplant in the back of a moving ambulance at 90 miles per hour. That's not something that happens in real life, but it's fun.
Yeah. You talked earlier, I've mentioned this before, MechWarrior 2, it's a huge game. Obviously, you absolutely loved it. If you could pick any game where you could erase your memory, erase your playing experience, and get to play it all over again, what would you choose?
I would choose Elite.
Yeah?
Yeah, back to the roots.
The original one.
Yeah,
Wow.
the original one.
Yeah.
Frontier was a better game in every shape or form. It was the follow-up for it many years later. I played that on the Amiga. It was a great experience. But that sense of I can do anything, can go everywhere. There's a lot of stuff hidden around me that if I look, I will find it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had an experience as impactful as that since.
That's the sense of exploring, isn't it? And sort of using your imagination.
Yeah.
which is really great. What's the health industry like at the minute?
Is in transformation, right? You have seen a lot of layoffs and studios shutting
A
down
lot
across
of
the
layoffs,
world.
yeah. Ubisoft have laid off like quite a lot of people, haven't they?
Yeah, I did the
yeah.
tally yesterday, just in the UK, in the past month and a half, there were around 20 studios. So it is rough. And this has happened like probably 2 or 3 times throughout the games industry lifetime, right? The games industry is still growing in general, in aggregate. But there are several pain points, mostly to do with the nature of how games are made and how they are found and bought, that will require fundamental transformation of the industry as it happened before. Of course, there's always the wishful thinking that, oh, okay, this is just a phase. In a couple of years, things will go back to where they were.
Well, as technology changes and society, like look at streaming, for example. You know, now people now stream, whereas they used to buy DVDs. Industries move and change and evolve, don't they? So
This time, I think, is more cultural than anything else.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
It's the first time in history where we are time-starved. If you look back in the 80s, I would be looking for things to do with my time.
Yeah.
Right? We had a lot of free time in our hands.
Yeah.
Now we are bombarded, and the time slice is getting smaller and smaller. Attention is going through the window, and you have too much of disposable, like low effort content available to you, like small videos and small experiences, and everything is on a click of a button. You have it. That is transforming how people relate to games, how they use games in many fundamental ways. Particularly because you are so tired of so much inbound information, you are inclined to stick with what you know. This is why you have these games that are always here, like the Fortnites or the Call of Duties and the FIFAs, and exactly.
People stick with what they're familiar with, so they can engage with it quickly. They know the controls.
Yeah.
They know. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
They are tired because there's a lot of information going. We're working more than ever, right? So the prospect of you learning something new, going through a tutorial, etc., is not as
Appetizing
welcoming
as it was. Yeah.
as it was, right? As a result of that, it's now very hard for publishers who fund games, essentially, right, and take them to market, to ensure that the game that they're putting to market is going to be successful. Because catching the eyeballs is harder than ever. And some of the levers they could pull in the past, like, oh, I will buy ads, or I will buy influencers, or I will buy, I don't know, space on a magazine or whatever, that would yield results, don't anymore. All the power of discoverability are in the platform hands. Right? If I have a PC game, the kingmaker of success is Steam. And its algorithms, right? And Steam is very pro player. It will not allow someone to create an artificial success by spending money. Steam doesn't take money.
You can't throw money off. Yeah, you can't throw money at the problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly that, right? You cannot buy exposure inside of Steam, for instance. And if you buy exposure elsewhere, once you get inside of Steam, it is a black box. You don't know if that person actually bought the game or not. So that lever, the publisher don't have anymore. And it's the same in the app stores, and etc. So at some point, the publishers are losing the ability to be kingmakers. And with that comes the risk of, is this game going to be successful on its own merit or not? And how do I predict that? How can I tell if a game that doesn't yet exist is going to become exact?
Because it's such a huge investment on going out on such a limb.
Yeah, it's massive, right? There's no such thing as a cheap game. No. Unless the 2 guys living on a basement, right? Not taking a salary, making a game.
Yeah,
that's
or
a cheap
making a
game.
console like the Spectrum. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But if you put a team of 10, 15, 20 people together, that's
salaries, developers don't come cheap.
Exactly, for years, right? That's a big shot. So you have that dynamic going on. So publishers are being far more cautious and not signing as much. Development became more expensive because expectation from the players has always gone up. And you have this perfect storm. Now things will change, they will settle, games are still a big thing, everybody's going to continue to play them. But how they're made is going to be fundamentally transformed in the next few years. And it's going to be, every change is going to be painful.
I think there's more opportunity then for smaller independents like yourself to flourish and make a name for yourself.
Yeah, the way I see it, I think that teams will be 4 or 5 people, tops, being able to do a lot with that.
Yeah,
if you
quite
look,
agile.
Very agile. And if you look at big games on PC recently, which is where most of the creativity comes from, right? Games that are innovating on paradigms of gameplay design, etc., they're mostly on PC first, then they migrate to other platforms. They start on PC. If you look at things like Valheim, was like 4 or 5 people team. Vampire Survivors was a single guy. Factorio, a single guy. And Little Company, it's like it's a small studio in Sweden. I think there are 6, 7 guys. It's small teams doing a lot, right? And these are multi-million selling games.
Yeah, of course.
Very successful. At the same time, you have games that cost like 10 times that, with 10 times the amount of people, not achieving the same level of success.
No.
So if you are funding this, which one are you going to fund?
And the opportunity for smaller independents, because the marketplace is so vast. I mean, most people, not everyone's a gamer, but most people have a console or a computer. So that when the marketplace is that vast, you only need a tiny slice of that pie to be very, very profitable.
If you are a small team.
If you're a small team.
Exactly.
But if you're a big organization, you need a big chunk of that pie.
Yeah, exactly. Right? On a game that costs you, say, 15 million to make, which is not a AAA game. No. It's not a big game. No. Right? It's what we would call a AA. Probably 20 people, 2-3 years development. You need to sell 1 million copies to be able to break even. Yeah. And selling 1 million copies today is a hard ask.
Yeah.
There is a lot of games there competing for your attention, and all of them very good.
Yeah. And there's only a couple of like superstar franchises, like as GTA 6, which is coming out later this year.
Yeah.
They're already billing that as the event of the year.
Oh yeah. If they don't break it up, it's going to be a huge success.
Yeah.
It's theirs
for the taking.
For the taking.
Yeah.
Right. Making a game like GTA from scratch. Good luck with that. It's like
no chance. Yeah. Yeah. All the complexities and the stories and the amount of people that you need.
Everything.
Side missions alone. Never mind main storylines.
Yeah. And if you look at GTA 6 or even 5, the last one, right? It didn't come out of nowhere. It's a process that evolved from a 2D top-down game that was the original GTA, right, into what it became. A lot of lessons were learned throughout those decades and built on top of each other until you finally end up with what we call GTA 6. For someone to come and challenge that from scratch, it's very, very hard, right? I wouldn't say impossible, but I wouldn't go there.
It's not a fight that you want to take? No. Okay. I've got one last question for you. If you could recommend a really underrated game, what would you recommend? Something that deserves a bit of spotlight and that people should go out and buy and play. And I'll put a link to it in the bottom of the video.
Underrated?
Yeah.
There's so much stuff. So much stuff.
You can rattle a few if you want.
Okay, so it depends on what you want. If you like building things, it's like a simulation and not simulation, optimizing things, etc. I would definitely play the latest version of Factorio Space Age. Okay, it's about building big factories and automating things and going mental in kind of industrial scale. Okay, if you want a cozy experience at just you or maybe you and a kid, etc., take something like Stardew Valley. It's not new, but keeps being updated all the time, and it's such a lovely kind of warm feeling wrapping around. If you want a survival game, I'm launching one in a couple of months.
Well, you can plug it.
Yeah, go check Lost Skies.
Yeah.
Is a co-op PvE survival game that we are launching.
Fantastic.
And if you like a lot of adventure with your friends, I would suggest go PvE with a Little Company. It's a very fun game.
Okay, fantastic. Henrique, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you.